Hello. We want to talk now about two more key concepts of Aristotle's metaphysics and physics. These are the concepts of potentiality and actuality. In fact, you've already encountered these two concepts. You've encountered them as soon as you encounter the concept of substance, and it's spelled out a little bit when we encounter the explanation that a substance is a composite of matter and form. And we encounter them in Aristotle's account of causality in those first two causes, the material cause and the formal cause. Potentiality and actuality are sort of like what we in philosophy today would call modes. Okay? Potentiality, actuality, necessity being three basic modes, what we call in logic modes. And the idea of potentiality in Aristotle is just the possibility for something to be something other than what it in fact currently is. It has a potential. We see this in, say, living things. Okay? An acorn has the potential to grow into an oak tree. It's not an oak tree, but under the right conditions and circumstances, it could grow into one. It does not have the potential to grow into a squirrel or a human being or an automobile. And the same is true with inanimate things as well. Material has potential to be formed in different ways. Okay? So there's a potentiality associated with things. So, matter is a principle of potentiality because matter is stuff that can be something. There was no word for matter in the vocabulary of ancient Greek philosophy prior to Aristotle, despite the fact that the pre-Socratic philosophers were talking about things like air and fire and water and all of the other traditional elements and combinations of them. These were conceived largely as qualities with particular types of properties. They didn't conceive of these the way Aristotle conceives of matter, and there was no word such as matter, this word that we have today. There was, of course, a word for body, right, because we all have bodies and we're familiar with different bodies, but no abstract concept of matter. Aristotle uses the word hule, which originally means timber or ballast. So hule, timber, right? Timber is trees, of course, but trees that are no longer trees. They're trees that have been cut down and they're ready to be used for something. This was used as ballast for ships too, so that's why the word is also the word for ballast in ancient Greek. But what's timber? What's wood? What's lumber? Well, wood is just stuff that's not anything yet, but that's prepared to be used for something, to become something. So this is the word that Aristotle chooses to introduce this concept matter, uses a familiar word and makes it into this abstract concept that we translate as matter. However, we still have words that use the same root as Aristotle's hule, such as the word hylomorphic, right? Something that has a material form. So matter is a principle of potentiality. Think, for example, about a lump of clay. A potter's lump of clay, this is potentially many things. It could be a vase, it could become a coffee mug, it could become a plate, it could become a bust, it could become a variety of different things. So it's matter, it's stuff that can become something, and then when it's actually given that form, when the potter takes the clay and throws it into a vase on the wheel and then fires it, then that clay that was potentially a vase has the particular form and is actually the vase. So it's the form in the matter that makes the matter actually the thing that it is only potentially before it has that form. And this matter is a principle of potentiality, form a principle of actuality. Now, these two terms, potentiality and actuality, Aristotle also uses then in his definition of motion or change. And this applies to all kinds of change, and not just locomotion, not just motion from one spatial point to another spatial point, but any kind of change. And motion Aristotle defines as the actuality of potentiality qua potentiality. So if we think about that clay sitting in the bin, it's potentially a coffee cup. But it's not actually a coffee cup. You can't drink out of it. You pour your coffee in there, it's just going to run all over the place. When it gets thrown and put into the form of a coffee cup and glazed and fired, then it's actually a coffee cup that you can use. It's no longer a potential coffee cup, as it was when it was clay in the bin. It's an actual coffee cup because it has been given the form of the coffee cup that it only potentially had before, and this is a process that is completed. So the potentiality is not actually a motion. The clay can just sit in the bin forever, right? The actuality of the potentiality, the completed coffee cup, that's a completed change. That's not the change itself. So the change is what goes on in between there. So Aristotle defines it not as the actuality of potentiality. That would be what you have after you already have the cup that you can drink out of. But it's the actuality of potentiality qua potentiality, the actuality of potentiality insofar as it is potentiality. Aristotle uses that term, that condition, to pinpoint the process that's going on between the time when the clay is just sitting waiting to be used and the time when the completed coffee cup is taken out of the kiln. We might also say it's something like the actualization of the potentiality. It's not Aristotle's way of describing it, but it might give you a little bit clearer idea that this is the actuality of the potentiality qua potentiality. It's the actuality of that particular process there, the act of putting the form into the matter. And that is Aristotle's definition of motion and change.